Thanks.
You mentioned the pandemic. It obviously comes up in quite a few discussions, and that's caused some very tumultuous several years for the education industry globally, but certainly, and I'd say especially here in Australia. Given your experience here in the Asia Pac region and really uh, experience around the globe, what do you think universities are getting right today? And then where do they need to improve, adapt, stop, change what they're doing?
Yeah, great question. I mean, obviously, no sectors, no industries were prepared for a pandemic, and not the least higher education. So it's easy in hindsight to say you weren't prepared, but no one we weren't prepared as a business. I remember having to the week after ScoMo shut the country down, sign an enormous invoice for laptops so that we could send all our staff to work from home. Everyone was on desktops in an office, and I had to spend an absolute fortune on laptops so that we could keep everyone working from home. And you'll remember this with you. Well, how long will they be there? And would they come back in the office in a few weeks' time? So no one was prepared for it. I will say, as it pertains to us in the online education world, no one, very, very few universities had any form of plan for online education at scale. I've used this example before, but the sort of bellwether for coming together as a sector is the trip to Canberra once a year when you go and do the higher education, the Australian Higher Education Conference. And I've mentioned this before, but for the 3 years prior to COVID, there wasn't a single session or discussion on online education on the agenda for 3 years prior.
Wow.
Now they talk about a lot at that conference, and we're all there, but no one was talking about it, and no one was prepared for it. So we got the outcomes we got as a result of it. So I think the things that higher education has done well, and I see universities doing really well in this is, and I think even prior to COVID, this was happening, and I'd be curious to hear your take on this. I think there's been a mentality change towards looking outside of the confined sandstone walls. Whether that comes to partnerships, and I think Australia's history in international education has got a lot to do with that too. We're a bit more open and receptive. There were a lot of new innovative partnerships happening. You look at things like Swinburne Online really set stuff in motion. Things like Moodle and other things being created here. There's a sort of environment that's somewhat embracing of the external, I think, in Australia. And I certainly saw, and I'm curious to hear your take, I certainly saw over the years that was becoming more and more open, and it was becoming easier and more accessible for universities to think outside of doing everything themselves. So, and COVID has accelerated that. They needed partnerships, and they needed external support and experts to be able to help upskill quickly and bring in competence. So I think the mentality change has really helped in that, the competitive environment for universities aren't other universities. They are anyone and everyone these days that can, help and support and upskill people. And I'm sure we're going to talk about the sort of skills growth at some point in time. And then I think the other is this sort of need for the improvement on the student experience and the consumer expectation side is certainly getting better. I don't think it's unfair to say that higher education lags a lot of industries in terms of its quality of user experience and its alignment to what happens in whether it's retail or travel or online banking or Netflix or whatever you want to use. So I think we're getting slowly better at that, and again that's a result of more public-private partnerships. So I think maybe I may say this because I'm on the outside and it's easy to look at it that way, but it's a lot easier to do business with universities than maybe it was 10, 15 years ago, and I think the mentality shift has happened. I still think there's a long way to go, and I, most of the universities we have the fortune to work with would acknowledge such. I'm still amazed in 2023 that we are now that a lot of universities don't have a digital strategy. And there's a building strategy, and there's a IT strategy,
right.
There's a teaching and learning strategy, and there's an infrastructure strategy. And the biggest disruptive force over the last 10, 15 years and going forward is, digital and technology and the fast emergence of it. And really, for the most part, universities don't have a combined structured digital strategy, which amazes us, and I'm sure be similar to you when you walk in and try, well, where will we fit in with that, and what are the measurements of success, and how are we going to sit alongside the other initiatives you're trying to do, and where are you trying to get to by 25, 30? And it's hard then to be successful, because you're sort of a subcomponent of something that'll maybe join up with something else at some point in time. So I truly think that's an enormous piece of work that a lot of education executives are going to have to work on as well. What is our institution's digital strategy, and how are we going to stay as fast or as close as we can to keeping a pace with it? And then on a probably more micro level, I think the measurements of success in higher education are changing and need to. I was on a panel the other day where we were talking about retention, topic close to my heart, and there was a perspective, rightly, that online retention and attrition in online education can be markedly different or worse than in face-to-face education, which in a lot of cases is correct, but it isn't an apple to an apple, and the measurement of success for the student is the viewpoint through which we should be looking at it, as opposed to what TEXA guides us to do. The argument that is someone better off doing a 4-year bachelor's of IT or a 2-3-year master's of IT, or are they better off taking some courses in cyber and risk or IoT and moving to the data science or moving to the next? Surely the user gets to sort of decide what level and volume of skills they need in order to move and progress within their life, depending upon their age, of course. But I think we need to adapt a lot more to less the sort of internal and insular views of what success and completion and retention and graduation and other things look like, and more towards, well, what do we need in order to be able to feel comfortable that there's progression in skills and expertise, but also that that's what the user needs and wants, and that's sufficient, and that if they've got that inside 3.5 months and they've progressed on with their life, are they a failure, and are they a failed statistic? So that I think there's a lot in there, and there's a whole Pandora's box around that, especially when it comes to lifelong learning and evaluation of skills. But I just summarize it by saying I really think we've progressed a lot in understanding that higher education doesn't start and stop when you're 18 to 22. That sort of front ending of education, that there is a perspective that we need to be much more tied towards lifelong learning, however that user wants to get it.
Wonderful. Wow. There's so much in there to unpack.
It's a really long answer, Dan.
Well, I think it was a yes/no question, Ryan. So yeah.
I failed.
No.
There you go. The measurement of success was wrong.
Yeah. So just building on a couple of those points, I think one of I would agree with so much of what you said, and that COVID really broke down a lot of barriers, and the old excuses of no, we can't do it that way, no, we can't do it online, no, we can't change. Well, there was no choice. So just as you said, you had to buy laptops, and everyone had to work at home that week. And I'm talking to a number of institutions and organizations that within 2 weeks they didn't have an online program or a full-fledged online program. They had to spin one up in a matter of weeks. How do you do that? But I think it's also helped remove barriers for the learners, right? So again, not necessarily do they have to follow the same path that an institution or previous generations.
Completely. And don't get me wrong, Dan, I have no problem with all of us being unprepared for a pandemic and having to do what we needed to do, right? I mean, it's if you have to stand outside Woolworths at 7 a.m. to make sure you get toilet roll, then the comparison to building a course on the fly for students anywhere and everywhere quickly and not doing it brilliantly is not far off. However, I love a line I heard recently, which was that no one learning to swim in a flood is going to win gold at the Olympics. So it's fine to be unprepared, but what have we learned out of it? And how does that then inform the fact that, there is a need for a coherent digital strategy across all institutions? We've moved towards, we already had less and less people coming to campus and wanting learning in different forms, modalities and areas. There is no way we're ever reverting back to whatever normal was. So how do we embrace the fact that change has absolutely happened, and that a digital life is going to impact universities forever? So we've got to embrace that, and I think that's and I say we in the Royal We, it's our responsibility, it's your responsibility, it's corporate's responsibility, it's professionals' responsibility, it's university's responsibility. We're all in figuring this out together.